I'm the Reverend Krista Taves, and it is my privilege to serve as your minister of congregational life. And happy Easter. If you're new to us, we are an intentional community whose shared work is to welcome all genders, all races, all sexual orientations. We strive to welcome people of all creeds and beliefs, all economic circumstances, and all types of families. Our vision is to create a just world through vibrant, beloved community. If you would like to connect with us and learn more about our congregation, just fill in the guest card that you should have received when you arrived. And if you didn't get one, our greeters will be happy to give you one after the service. And if you're joining us online and you're visiting, let us know by dropping us a line at welcome@eliotchapel.org. We have 2 coffee hours. Here on site, we have our coffee-less coffee hour over in Adams Hall so that we can keep our masks on, and our online Zoom coffee hour starts at 12:30. In the Unitarian Universalist religion, we light a chalice to symbolize that we are entering sacred space and that we have prepared our hearts and minds for the blessing of beloved community. These are our opening words for this morning. Spirit of Easter, we gather this day to celebrate the return of spring after the hard winter, the resurrection of life after death, and the revival in our hearts of confidence, trust, and hope. Come into our presence during this hour, teaching us to attend to that which springs afresh in our lives, that we may be continually open to the new, the revitalizing, the transforming, which is a very miracle in our midst. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 1000. Morning has come.
Good morning, I'm David Cox. Please join me now in the unison reading of our church covenant. As a free congregation, we promise to one another our mutual trust and support. To create beloved community, we promise to be kinder to each other than we have to be, to listen fully to each other with an open mind and heart, to speak responsibly and respectfully, to find ways to improve our church for all members and friends.
Well, happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Wake up, computer. So, for our wisdom story this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about Easter in the Ukraine. In Ukraine, in normal times, they do Easter big. Early on Easter morning, people bring their baskets, their Easter baskets, into church to be blessed by the priest. Nobody did that this time, did you? Just that I'd ask. It's probably not a good idea to let me near your Easter basket, actually. But in Ukraine, they actually don't put candy in their Easter basket. They put breakfast things like ham and bread and boiled eggs. So the most famous Easter tradition from Ukraine is one that you're probably familiar with, actually, and that is creating the very complex and lovely, beautiful eggs called paisenki. You've probably seen them. They're made with layers of wax and dye, and after you've made your creation, there's a little suction tool. You pull out the insides of the egg, and I've made a model here. This is coloring from the internet. You can get these. It's kind of a fun exercise to do. Oh, fire. Oh, God. Thank you. So, but I have to think that and it took a while, and this was just coloring, and I have to think that paper and markers are a much more forgiving medium than eggshells. I have a lot of admiration. And like many Easter customs, this one came thousands of years, actually, or hundreds of years before Christianity. It sounds familiar, actually, from other pagan traditions I know. During the winter months, when the days grow shorter and the dark gets longer, people just assumed that the sun god was angry with them and was leaving them. So to bring him back, they decided to give him a gift. Paisenka means writing, and people actually would give these eggs to each other, like sending a card or greetings. And you might give somebody an egg when they got married to wish them good luck, or health or prosperity. And the different colors have different meanings. You'll see eggs that have a lot of black in them, and black stands for honoring the dead, but also the dark before the dawn. Red means happiness, hope, and passion. Green, new life, pretty clear, and white means purity, light, and birth. Eggshells were also meant to be, these creations were meant to be temporary. They were put into cattle feed afterwards to make the cattle stronger. They were buried in the garden to have a better harvest. An egg with an eternity symbol, was placed in beehives so that there would be continuous honey. When a house was being built, paisenka was put on the four corners of the foundation to protect against evil spirits. When Ukraine became Christianized in the 9th and 10th centuries, the symbols were adapted to the Easter story and began to mean things like death and resurrection, hope, and the love of God. But people never really forgot the older meanings. They just started to mean more things. In the 19th and 20th century, when times got hard and Ukrainians began emigrating all over the world, they took this custom with them. And that is how we know these beautiful eggs. And they mean something special right now with everything that's happening in Ukraine. People here in the diaspora, our artists are teaching people more and more how to make them, and they're selling them and giving the proceeds to help the people there. There's an artist, Sofika Zielik. She's a Ukrainian-American artist, and she has a whole art exhibition of these eggs that she's created in New York. And she said, She was interviewed on NPR, and she said, when the end of the war comes, she will bring all the decorated eggs from her installation there to her ancestral homeland. She said, we're going. We're going with hammers and nails, and these eggs are coming with us. Symbolically, they will be dug into the fields. They will be put in people's houses as they're being rebuilt. This will happen, she said. This will definitely happen. Just as it was for her ancestors, these eggs will be part of Ukraine's rebirth. This year, I invite all of us to contemplate this and feel and find ways to express your solidarity with the Ukrainian people and give thanks for the gifts that they've already given us. That's the end of our story.
I invite you to join with me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. O Spirit of life and renewal, we have wintered enough, mourned enough, oppressed ourselves enough. Our souls are too long cold and buried, our dreams all but forgotten, our hopes unheard. We are waiting to rise from the dead. In this, the season of steady rebirth, we awaken to the power so abundant, so holy, that returns each year through earth and sky. We will find our hearts again and our good spirits. We will love and believe and give and wonder and feel again the eternal powers of life. Let us enter into a time of silence for the prayers and meditations of our hearts. Let us speak the names of those we hold in prayer. The flow of life moves ever onward through one faithful spring and another, and now another. May we be forever grateful. Amen and blessed be. This prayer was by Jane Zabka. Our next hymn, please remain seated for our meditative hymn number 62, When the Daffodils Arrive. Almost every Sunday of the year during our offertory, we look outward to our community and we give away half of our offering to an organization that reflects our spiritual values. But on special Sundays like this one, we turn our attention inward to those who make this their spiritual home, our beloved members and friends. And this offertory is taken for us to take care of each other. It's the minister's discretionary fund. This fund is used for things like utilities, rent, food, clothing, medical costs for those in our congregation who are economically vulnerable. So let us be generous as we take care of each other. Let us take the offering. Please join me in blessing this offertory with the words printed in our orders of service. To the work of the Church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you.
We have a, excuse me, we have a different reading than you see in your order of service. I changed it. I found this one, and I think you'll like it. It is by the Reverend Kendall Gibbons. It's called A Humanist Speaks of Easter. I don't believe that the crucifixion is a story that with a happy ending, or that it was a one-time event. It happens over and over as the human journey unfolds. It happens to us, to the people we love. It happens to the righteous and the innocent. Crucifixion happens, and it feels like the end of the world every time. It feels like nothing could matter anymore, ever. And then inevitably and miraculously, something happens next. Something happens. Of course it does. Because the world hasn't ended yet. It's not always an empty tomb. How trite would that become? Mostly, the beloved bodies just lie right there, peacefully decomposing. But something happens, and whether we want it or not, a new chapter begins. Maybe the sun comes up, or the lilies do. Spring rolls around. That happens. Or memories come, or someone needs you. You eat food. That happens. You walk down the road and share a recollection. Life happens, keeps happening. The dead don't rise, but we do. One day it happens. You take a breath, and it doesn't hurt to breathe. You start to see people again, really see them. Hope rises, community rises, you rise, we rise, life rises. Not because death isn't real. Crucifixion is not just pretend, but because something else is just as real, maybe even more real. Something happens next. That is the other thing we know for sure. Life rises, outrage rises, love rises, faith rises, tears rise, hope rises. This I believe. So ends our reading. Did anything in the Easter story really happen? And how can we know? This we know for sure, that for thousands of years we have lived with death, and we have been left bewildered and sometimes hurt and afraid. We do know for sure that for thousands of years we were fearful that when the sun went away and everything went cold and dark, there was no assurance that spring would come. And we needed a way to hope. So we created rituals and told stories and made beauty. This we know for sure. This we know, that people can be brutal with one another. There is oppression and deep injustice in the world. We see this perhaps most clearly in Ukraine right now. And the Jews living in Jesus' time experienced such oppression. They were occupied by the Romans. And then a rabbi came and brought healing to a large number of people and led them in a peaceful form of resistance. This was different from just being passive and staying out of the way and keeping your head down and avoiding trouble. This was different. In fact, that was not possible. But resistance and dignity and hope were. The Romans were clear what they would do when this would happen, when something like this happened. Roman law executed anyone who stirred up the people, which Jesus clearly did. And by all reasoning, that should have been the end of it. Did this really happen? Well, a Jewish and a Roman historian, both outside this community of believers, the gospel tradition, these two independent historians writing about the end of the first century, the beginning of the second, both agree that there was a man called Jesus in that time and place. They agree that he led a popular movement and that he was killed for it. And they agree that the execution was not the end of that movement and that that was a surprise. The movement just got bigger. Even when Christians were being persecuted for it, it kept growing. And so the people that he left behind who were hurt and bewildered were also hopeful. They held rituals, they told stories, and they created beauty. The story that they told about all of this, to put it mildly, took on a life of its own. The key moment in the Easter story, the moment, the resurrection itself, Jesus coming out of the tomb, is never actually described in the text. There's a lot leading up to it. The death on the cross, picking his body down, putting it in the tomb, the reappearances. But the resurrection itself, the thing that everything seems to hinge on, is just not there. It's not described in the text. So says Dominic Crossan, one of my favorite New Testament scholars. This omission meant that artists in the early church could show this moment however they imagined it, however they were inspired themselves. Now, icon painters were and are very serious, deeply religious people who pray and fast before they make a piece of art. The earliest images that they produced went in two basic directions. Crossan says, one where Jesus appears alone, and one where there are others that are with him. And these two coexisted for a long time. You could see either one in a church. The church was all one at that point. And around the first millennium, the Eastern Orthodox Church split from the Roman Church, and then those two images split as well. One went east and one went west. I wanted you to see them. So I posted examples on the Eliot Chapel Facebook page. If you have your phone with you, you can get it out now. Preachers in other traditions ask you to look up something in the Bible. I'm asking you to look at Facebook. I hope lightning does not strike us. So if you just go to Facebook and look up Eliot Unitarian Chapel, you should find it. So first, I'll discuss the Western image. Jesus comes triumphantly out of the tomb by himself. You have some adoring angels on either side, but he's doing this by himself. He is the focus in the picture. And I have to say, he looks fabulous. He looks like he's just come out of the gym. This actually, by the way, the one that I posted is a real icon. It came from a monastic website. Now, if you can see the other image, this is from the Eastern Orthodox Church, and Crossan described leading a tour group in Turkey one day, and the group was kind of bottlenecked in one part of the church. They were trying to get ready to be allowed in to visit the other part of the church, and so he was stuck in front of this picture, and he saw something he hadn't seen realized before, that this image, and in all of the others in the Orthodox Church, Jesus is not coming out of the tomb by himself. I mean, he still looks good, but now he is grabbing the wrists of a man and a woman. He's pulling them up from their caskets, from the depths. And they are inscribed in some of these icons directly as Adam and Eve. And underneath their feet, you see this kind of small, I don't know if you could see it on your phone, but you see a small shadowy figure all bound up. That is not Satan, but it is Hades, who is more like a prison guard for the underworld. I thought it was interesting that a figure from Greek mythology would find its way into the picture. And sprinkled below, you can see broken locks and keys, broken doors, and empty coffins. This is symbols of freedom and liberation. In Genesis, Adam and Eve, of course, are the first human beings. And in this image, in these images here, they stand for all human beings. They are resurrected along with him at the same time. They don't have to do anything to deserve it. Now, this was not the story that I was raised on as a child. I was not told everyone gets resurrected, that everybody gets saved, and there's nothing special that you have to do. Quite the opposite. And it shaped the question that we were asked when I was a middle schooler attending a fundamentalist church. The question is, are you saved? They would ask us that. Have you been saved? And once you could say that you were, that you had said the prayer of confession, that you had done the things, all the right things, then you were to go out and save other people. It was our training to ask our friends, are you saved? That was called witnessing for your faith. And if you were lucky, your friend would say, no, or they would say, what do you mean? And then you would have your opening, you see, and you would start talking about scary things like sin and death and hell and heaven, and then wrap it up by inviting them to your Sunday school. It was a church growth strategy. I see that now. But also, it gave you the chance to give the church's answers for people's fears, the very human and perhaps universal fear of death, ours and the death of the people we love. The picture of Jesus emerging alone from the tomb has a very specific answer to how one is saved from death. Believe in this lone person who is God. Believe in this particular way. And in the other image, the Orthodox image, it seems to take a lot more people for resurrection to happen. It reminded me of our Universalist ancestors who taught universal salvation or universal resurrection. They taught that a loving God could never send anyone to hell. You simply couldn't say God loves everyone, but would also allow them to be tormented for eternity. They had a different answer to the question, are you saved? And their answer was, yes, yes, and so are you, and so is everyone else. That answer would have irritated me to no end as a fundamentalist teenager. But you can see something like it by looking at this Eastern Orthodox image. Jesus grabbing the wrists of Adam and Eve, everybody pulling them up all together at the same time, all resurrected at the same time, no exceptions. Now, when you study an icon, you are invited to find your own meaning in it. And so when I contemplated this image of Jesus saving everyone at the same time, this is what I thought. I thought, we are not saved for ourselves alone. We are not saved by ourselves. We must help each other. We must save one another. A story. Early last December, my family got word that my oldest brother Jeff was dying. Jeff lived in Rochester, Minnesota, which is an 8-hour drive from here. And my already weary husband had just driven back to St. Louis from Florida to take care of some of his father's affairs. But we got the call, and he got in the car with me, and we drove. We knew we probably wouldn't get there in time, and we knew we probably would not see my brother. There was a surge of COVID cases then, so Mayo Hospital was only allowing 5 visitors at a time, even for the dying. 5 human visitors, that is. We were grateful that they allowed Barney, who is Jeff's beloved Brittany Spaniel, to lay on his bed. When we were about an hour away, we got a text that Jeff had died. So we went straight to their house, a house that I knew well from large family Thanksgiving dinners that swelled from siblings to people getting married to having children to those children having children, a house full of joy and people. And we went there. We had lost our brother Steve in 2017, and now it was just my sister and me left of the 4 siblings. Both brothers, Jeff and Steve, died of lung disease. I was acutely aware at that moment that I had not. I had been saved. The closest thing I've come in my life to a resurrection, I had a double lung transplant, as many of you know, three years ago, and I'm doing well. Steve also had a transplant, but only lived for 13 months, and many of them in the hospital. And I was acutely aware of that. And it could not have been easy for Steve's wife, who was there with us. It could not have been easy for my sister-in-law, Gary, to see me. Nor was it easy for me to learn that week that Jeff also, seeing how well I had done with the transplant, had inquired about getting one for himself, just to be told that at age 78, he had aged out of most programs. I started to feel pretty mad at lung disease that week. I am thankful. I am so thankful to have been saved. But if we are not saved just for ourselves, well, then what do we do about it? How do we save other people if that's our job? What do we do when we're faced with suffering and death? We've lived these past 2 years looking at so much of it. I know that some of you have seen a lot. And the images and the stories coming out of Ukraine show death surrounding the living, common graves of 40 to 60 people being exhumed as quickly as possible, trying to identify people to give them some honor while they still can. So much death and violence. How do you bring life in the middle of that? What do you do? Well, for one thing, I think we bear witness. We bear witness to what's happening. We don't look away. Catholic leaders speak of the Ukrainian people as living through their own passion story now, their own crucifixion, and they are praying for and working for a resurrection. Pope Francis spoke of Russia's invasion of Ukraine as, quote, the work of some autocrat sadly caught up in the claims of nationalist interests. But, he said, but ordinary people sense the need to build a future that will either be shared or will not be at all. Ordinary people sense the need to build a future that will be shared or will not be at all. So it is our job to lift up those people, to be those ordinary people. To support those who are doing the thousands of ordinary things to help each other live just one more day. It won't be one person that saves everyone, but thousands. Maybe there is no blueprint, no clear description anywhere of how we get saved. Maybe we have to invent it ourselves over and over again. We do small things. I could not save my brothers, but I can tell my story. And maybe if I join forces with people working to persuade more people to be organ donors, because we need so many more, then more who need them will be saved. When the 5 members of my family who were at the hospital when my brother Jeff had died, when they came home, we did what we knew how to do. We crowded around the tiny kitchen table and we drank coffee. We told stories about Jeff and Steve. One story turned into another, and for those moments, there they were. And there we were, all together for that moment. Somebody made a pot of chili. Somebody called the caterer, and very slowly, we began to be saved. Kendall Gibbons writes, "The dead do not rise, but we do. One day it happens. You take a breath and it doesn't hurt to breathe. You start to see people again, really see them. Death is real, but something else is just as real, maybe even more real. Something happens next. That is the other thing we know for sure. Life rises, outrage rises, love rises, faith rises, tears rise, and hope rises. This I do believe." Amen. Please join me, if you would, in singing our next hymn. Lo, the day of days is here, and rise as you are willing and able.
Oh
Please remain standing for the closing words. Now, may the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. Amen. You may be seated.
Go in peace.